Welcome to this podcast is making me thirsty, the number one destination for Seinfeld fans. This is episode 53. Today actually marks our 1 year anniversary. We recorded our first episode 1 year ago today. Our guest this week is a Canadian actor and writer. In 2009, he was awarded the Alliance of Canadian Cinema, Television, and Radio Artists Award of Excellence in recognition of his body of work. He played Ben Bellow in the comedy series 18 to Life. You know him from The Red Green Show, Made in Canada, and of course as Lloyd Braun in the season 5 Seinfeld episode written by Larry David, The Non-Fat Yogurt. Please welcome Peter Keleghan. Peter, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. How you doing?
Good.
Peter, welcome to the show, and you are the Lloyd Braun in our minds, so we're really excited.
Bless your heart. I was the first anyway. That's a long, sad story.
Well, we'll get into that. So take us back. So 1993, you've obviously 10 years into your career. You've had a great career thus far. You did some Cheers, some Murphy Brown. How did the Seinfeld role come about? And tell us a little bit about that.
It was as simple as an audition. And Mark Hirschfeld was casting at the time, and you get to know certain people at auditions, and for some reason, it just popped in my head that when I was back there at that time, it was me and Bryan Cranston auditioning all the time, sort of neck and neck, doing similar parts or similar auditions, because I guess we're similar types. Anyway, I guess he ended up playing the dentist on the show.
Yes.
Or a dentist, yeah.
Tim Watley, yeah.
Yeah, and after about a dozen auditions, we'd both look at each other and go, "You were me." Anyway, I ended up with Lloyd Braun and had a grand time. I mean, it was one of those parts that I always say as an actor, if it's really easy to learn, it's probably very right for you, and that's exactly the case with Lloyd. It's sort of a bit of a pompous. Well, I don't know how to go much further than pompous, but pompous and arrogant and slightly full of himself, I suppose.
What do you remember about the audition? Was Larry and David? Oh, sorry, was Larry and Jerry at the audition, if you recall?
Yeah, Larry was there, Jerry was there, the casting director Mark Hirschfeld was there, and I want to say there was maybe a writer or two. It was a pretty full room. It was maybe 5 people and me. It's kind of it's kind of intimidating when you jump into a place like that, when you're by the very nature of the thing, you're the stupid new guy. They've been running this marathon and they've been going full tilt for years, and you're coming in and you're trying to catch up to them. And to their credit, when I started doing the show, it was the kind of thing where they knew they were only as strong as their weakest link, so they really embraced the guest stars on the show, and to their benefit. It was very much something that the really good shows tended to do, because they knew that they wanted you to rise to the occasion and to catch up with what they were doing. And so they would befriend you at the craft table, and Larry David was as gracious as ever, and asked me if I had any ideas, and I said, I don't know, let's let me bring a bouquet of flowers to Mrs. Costanza to really rub it in, blah blah blah, and try this and that and all sorts of stuff. And as soon as you felt at home, you started to do more and more and more. You started to give more, and that's I guess the beauty of that show, the camaraderie and the group effort involved.
Yeah, we get that a lot from the guest stars we talked to, that it was pretty much unlike any other show in that respect, or most other shows where they let the guest stars shine. Yeah, Larry David wrote that episode, and it's funny when you mentioned the pompousness, because your lines in the first scene, just right off the bat, a lot of major chicks in this place, just like you right off the bat, you're establishing who this guy is. It's so good. And
the writing was top notch. There was never a problem. And when you start with something like that, and it's easy to learn and it's fun to do, that it's going to shine,
right.
and that you're established in the first few seconds. And once that happens, you get on the surfboard and you sail.
You mentioned bringing the flowers, so that's another scene we love. Is I believe you might be our first guest who's had a real big scene with Frank and Estelle. we really wanted to get your take on working with Jerry Stiller and Estelle Harris in that scene. I mean, it's an incredible scene. It's one of our favorite scenes. Just the way they
Yeah,
react to you and everything with Georgia
yeah.
there.
And they
So
had me
good.
come in looking like Darth Vader, I think, with that big coat, and I'm kind of towering over them. And yeah, it was a lot of. I mean, all those actors. I mean, they're just top of the game and lovely people, and the more they gave you, the more you wanted to do. And there's a certain time when you're going too far, and maybe the flowers. I don't remember if I ended up bringing flowers or not, but if I did, that maybe was a little bit rubbing it in too much. But um, you know, that whole scene being uh, between the three of them, and the three of them having the chemistry that they already have, and me becoming the fly in the ointment for that whole thing was just such a joy. And he did. Jerry had a really hard time with his lines. I remember that. But when he got them, when he delivered them, boy, they couldn't be better. Couldn't be better. And
Yeah,
her
you,
screeching voice, and the fact that I just thought, and she just thought that I was the bee's knees. Such a joy. Such a joy.
oh, that Lloyd Braun, he is something, right? There's that delivery,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, everyone can kind of relate to that, right? Everyone kind of has a friend or something that your mother kind of just always cherishes in a weird way, and that's
Oh
Lloyd, right?
yeah. And growing up, you always learned how to butter up mom and dad if you're especially if you're taking the girl out. And it was a thing that you
Right.
did, and it was a thing that usually did work if you were very polite and courteous to mom and dad. That you could bring her home an hour later. It's one of those things.
So what's great about this episode, it's such a New York centric episode. You're the big advisor for Dinkins, right? How much, and from Canada, like, and again, that was a pivotal election. I remember back in '93, it was a close election, and we'll get into kind of like there's obviously different storylines within this one episode that make it so interesting. But
Yeah, the
did you have to
logistics
get
of that
briefed
are
on
really amazing.
what's
Sorry, the
that?
logistics are quite amazing. I'll tell you in a second. But yeah, what was the question?
Yeah, so I'm just curious, like how much they prepped you on like who Dinkins was, like um, to prep for the Lloyd Braun role.
Well, the reality was that I had been living there for a few years, anyways, and
Okay.
being a Canadian living with America down south, it's like one of our prime ministers said, it's like sleeping with an elephant. You feel every move. So we know what's going on down there, generally speaking. We know. We watch Chauvin trial now. We watch the Trump thing, and we're pretty up on most things American, unlike perhaps Australia or countries that are further afield. Anyway, um, and we sound alike and we look alike. Anyway, the reality was that we shot two versions, so that whoever lost the election lost it because of the name tag. So we shot a version where I was Dinkins' assistant, and we shot a version where I was
Oh,
Giuliani's
that's how you
assistant.
did it. We were wondering how you did it. All right. So
Yeah,
so you shot. So you had to shoot a whole thing saying you were Giuliani's assistant and came up with the name tag idea. Then a whole thing saying you were Dinkins' assistant and you came up with the idea.
yeah.
Oh wow.
And the real amazing thing at the time, this is sort of pre explosive technology, was that both of those candidates agreed, because the show was so hot. Both of those candidates agreed that the day after the election, which was, I want to say, a Thursday, I might be wrong. I think the election was Wednesday. We shot it on Wednesday, and they both agreed that on the morning of airtime, which I think was Thursday evening, they would uh, um, satellite a feed in to say, we're going to look into the scourge of this, or whatever
Right,
the
right. Giuliani had his
button
little
was.
speech. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
about the
little speech at
yogurt.
the end that whoever the winner was, and there wasn't a concession speech, but it was Giuliani, I think, talking next day.
Wow.
Pretty
So
amazing.
it actually was. It played better with the way it played, with Dinkins being the incumbent and losing. I think because that also played up the Estelle stuff about and Frank stuff about you were actually the mayor's assistant. right? With the Giuliani stuff, I guess you would have just been Giuliani's assistant, and it wouldn't have been had the cachet of like, that he's actually
Yeah.
working for the mayor and got that whole name tag in place, and it was actually happening. Wow. So was your shooting schedule longer than normal, having to shoot double things, or they sort of just worked it all in? And
No, we were so damn good. We knocked it off in the same amount of time. That's my memory, anyways. It might have been a little different. I
Right.
don't know what their regular shooting schedule was. I had nothing to compare it to, obviously, because it was the first episode I ever done. So that's what I know about it.
Right. Oh, that's cool. I mean, this is interesting.
Were Dinkins and Giuliani on set, or did they have like separate shootings?
No, we shot the show in LA, and they're in New York, obviously. So yeah, we they were never on set. No, it was always remote feeds from them.
So Larry David would send the private jet, But it's funny. You mentioned Larry David and how generous he was and like ideas for the flowers. He pretty much worked across the board here with everyone except Kramer on the show, right? The opening scene with Jerry and you hitting on Elaine. I mean, that was just an incredible scene. Jerry not saying anything, I think, was just pure comedy gold. You kind of doing your thing, jabbing George. And then obviously the parents. And then obviously the date with Elaine. I mean, that Lloyd Braun face is unforgettable. I mean, any stories about those three that come to mind back in '93?
My memory is sketchy at this point. It's a long time ago. I remember Elaine had just given birth. Julia had just given birth and was breastfeeding. I remember that. And then there was a lot of running back and forth to dressing rooms and bottles being left in refrigerators and things to deal with for some assistant to deal with. George, what's his name? Good God. Jason Alexander was one of the most welcoming guys, just uber friendly, talking about some sort of new diet craze that he was on. It might have been one of the first Atkins something or other. And Jerry and the rest of the guys, like the writers and they were always kind of busy with doing whatever they needed to do to rewrite or to so they weren't, Larry wasn't always at the craft table being buddy, but whenever the opportunity arose, he was always right there and right in there and laughing at your mistakes and laughing at what you did. And Michael Kramer was kind of the odd man out in a lot of ways, and you may have heard this from other guest stars, but he was always, I heard that he was always kind of like the Marx Brothers, in that the Marx Brothers, whenever they did something twice, it was never as good as the second time. So Michael Kramer would be constantly off on his own, doing his own, practicing for some new way of coming in, because if he did it twice, it wouldn't feel as fresh for him. So he was a bit of a loner in that sense, that he was always off doing his own thing in the way that he wanted to do it. I guess that's about all I can think of right now. I got some good pictures. I got my sister a really nice Seinfeld sweatshirt signed by everybody, and that's got to be worth something, man.
Yeah. So it sounds like it was a great time. We all loved Lloyd Braun, and then Lloyd Braun comes back in season 7, a couple of years later, 95, different Lloyd Braun.
Different Lloyd Braun.
Right. I mean, to me, to us, you are Lloyd Braun. The second Lloyd Braun, the character is different, right? He's not the put together pompous guy we just talked about. He's more of a little bit more out there. He supposedly lost his mind, whatever it is.
Fallen from grace kind of guy.
Yeah, exactly. So take us through what's going on here. Why were you? Did you not want to come back? Did they ask you to come back? Did something else going on? Was your schedule not permitted? Was it just we just?
I had no idea. I mean, I did a couple of cheers, but I had no idea there was going to ever be any continuity to this character. So there was never any consideration that I was going to hang around Los Angeles for this kind of thing.
Right.
In the interim, I had 2 very small children, both of which were born down there in 92 and 94, and we wanted them in their early years to be back in Canada for so many reasons, like, family help, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So back in the day, you worked on something called an H-1 visa, which was a visa for foreigners with, I guess they called it extraordinary merit. Basically, what you had to do was to petition, the bureaucrats in Washington to say, oh, I got this award and this award in my country, and so I deserve to be in your country doing great things, presumably.
Right.
So that's what happened, and you would get a visa that would last 2 years. So I worked down there for I want to say 4 years, or maybe it was a little hangover from another H visa. Anyway, long story short, decided to come home and let the visas expire. Never considered anything. So all of a sudden, I get a phone call from my agent down there who said that Mark Hirschfeld had called and said they were bringing your character back. Can you get down here? And I said, of course I can. Yeah, great, wonderful. And hung up the phone thinking that, oh, sure, Castle Rock NBC wouldn't have any problem getting any foreigner a visa for a show that they had done previously, that only they can do it, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought, that's exciting. I'm going to do this thing. And then I thought, out of abundance of caution, I'm going to give my immigration lawyer that I had worked with a call and see what the deal was. So I called this guy and he says, oh, yeah, it's no problem. You have to do this, this, and this. And I said, yeah, that's all together. And you need 2 weeks processing time. I said, oh, well, I'm sure they can expedite that. He said, oh, no, they can't expedite that. That's just the way it works. You can't do anything about that. So I start to sweat profusely, and I start, scurrying around for the paperwork that I know I have. And then this lawyer that I had for this immigration work calls me back and says, I just got a call from the Seinfeld production company looking for advice on how to get you down to the United States to do the second episode of Seinfeld. And I said, oh, and he said, well, I had to tell them the same thing, that there's certain rules and regulations around the INS that they need 2-week processing time, and 2 weeks is expedited. And I just said, oh, this can't be happening. It can't be happening. And so they were incredibly gracious. Mark said, I will call you on the morning that we're auditioning for this part, because we got to do it in 2 weeks. Because they, episodic TV, they never work that far in advance, right? They just, it goes week by week, and then 2 weeks ahead of time, or whatever the time was. I did not have the 2-week processing time. And so I was just scrambling. I was faxing the Prime Minister of Canada. I did everything I possibly could to get down there. And at the end of the day, I couldn't do it. It just couldn't be done. And subsequently, I'd heard that, the H visa had been, the Actors Union, SAG-AFTRA down there, had been complaining that so many foreign actors were coming in under the umbrella of the H visa that they started to ask the INS to change the rules a little bit. 2 weeks processing time was one of the ways that they try to amend it to give more opportunity to American actors. And then there was something called the Taft-Hartley, where they had to prove that only you could do the part, and all kinds of other things. Gosh. But anyways, it was one of the most devastating times ever. One of the biggest regrets of my life that I couldn't go down and do this.
Wow.
Oh man,
that's an incredible story. I mean, and honestly, not to belittle, but great to hear, because it was great that you were wanted and wanted to get brought back.
Right? Yeah, that's
the good
part.
The irony of it, it's funny. In season 4, they had a whole episode dedicated, called "The Visa," dedicated to immigration with Babu, and he ended up getting kicked out.
Really?
So clearly, clearly the writers
maybe they wrote it because of that. I don't know.
Yeah, but wow, that's incredible. But hey, listen, for, like we've always said, for our money, you are the Lloyd Braun, and we know Lloyd Braun is based on Larry David's old lawyer, and he did big things with ABC television. Did you ever meet the real Lloyd Braun?
No, I knew nothing. Larry told me probably on set that was probably the case, but I never met anybody like this guy at all. I suppose what you're saying is that Larry said that this Lloyd was a childhood friend that they grew up with, and he was always overshadowing, eclipsing Larry David with mom and dad and that kind of thing. Is that what you're?
I think he had someone in mind of that, but he just used the name.
The actual name of Lloyd Braun.
Okay. I see. Okay.
Of his attorney. So
yeah.
And then he went out
They
to
do a lot.
bigger.
There's a few times they've used real names. So Peter, I just wanted to touch on this.
One other story just popped into my head. Sorry, you asked for stories and memories of the thing. That kid that comes in and says,
"Yes,
thanks for fucking up my dad's business." whatever he said.
Piece of shit.
That if it was extra time and shooting anything, that was the one, because nobody could keep it together. And it came to one of those times, and you've probably talked to actors before, where it becomes a chemical thing, and you can't even look at somebody knowing that you're anticipating this line to come up because you're going to go, and it's almost painful. It was painful. And this kid comes in with these big innocent eyes and says, "Thanks for whatever he says," and Jerry was gone from the very beginning. It was there should be an outtake reel with a bunch of those things on it.
Oh, I'd love to see that. I mean, we did a ranking of every episode before we started having guests on our podcast, and this is in the top 30. I think it landed like 32 or in the top 30 somewhere, because it's just incredible. Lines like that, your character. I mean, this could easily be one of the all-time greatest episodes, especially with that kid, the kid. What a lot of NBC primetime. Jerry's not even known as a working blue comedian, let alone just slipping in the what the fuck you doing, you piece of shit. I mean, it was just incredible. There was so many great lines.
Oh, and I think they started to embellish it too, because Jerry, they knew they were having such a hard time, so they tried changing it around a bit with different curse words, and it just went downhill from there.
It's so good. Good.
It was painful.
You had mentioned earlier, and we obviously we're big fans of Cheers as well. And I know you did two episodes of Cheers, and we had Anthony Stark on, who was on both Seinfeld and Cheers, and he kind of compared the sets for us. And I know you just went over what it was like on Seinfeld's set. It was kind of a well-oiled machine. You were there literally in the prime of the prime, season 5, middle of season 5. I mean, that's like height of Seinfeld. And with Cheers, I think it was the last season that you were on, but they must have been, from what we gathered, their set was a little bit looser than Seinfeld's set, perhaps. They might have not. I mean, they're both obviously professionals, but Cheers maybe was a bit more of a, not frat housey, but we've heard that it's a bit more less buttoned up maybe than Seinfeld. Do you have any stories about the Cheers set?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to tell too many tales out of school, but there were certain addiction problems with certain people, and so that certain things had to be moved around from day to day when certain people didn't show up, and
okay.
So there was some issues there, but for the most part, very, very much the same thing. James Burrows was king of the hill there, as was Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld in the other case. And I got to say, with all my experience as an actor for whatever it is now, 35 years, that the very best of all series, movies, whatever I've done, comes with the knowledge that there's one auteur involved. I've done a few shows up here that have been hugely successful up here, and as well as down there. And when the power is concentrated within one voice, within one or two, sort of primary points in the creative decision making, it is inevitably always better. Whenever there was here and there, whenever there's network interference, and whenever there's Joe Blow and Mary Sue adding their 2 cents in for whatever creative decision is trying to be made in writing jokes or scenarios, even though some of the ideas might be better, it's not going to be better, because there's a very sort of delicate sort of karma involved with how lines are written for certain characters in certain ways, and somebody that has that experience will be able to do that organically, rather than in any kind of intrusive way. So as I say, even if it's funnier, it's not going to be funner because it's not this organic thing. And that's very much the case with both Cheers and Seinfeld and Murphy Brown to a great extent. All of those people, Breaking Bad, Sopranos, any of these shows will show you that will show network executives, which they have a hard time understanding, because I think there's an awful lot of justifying jobs.
Right.
But in most cases, that's the case.
And
certainly was in those cases.
And you made a lot of like big cult following shows just there. Obviously Seinfeld is one of the biggest ones, and it's coming to Netflix this summer, so it should be an increased boost. But do you often, or still, I know it's 25 plus years ago, but do you still get stopped in the street and people reference Lloyd Braun?
Yeah, I do every once in a while. And oddly, whenever I go down to the United States, people say I'm Dr. Oz. They actually believe firmly that I am Dr. Oz traveling the States for whatever. And I my mother sees it. I don't get it. But anyway, I'm Lloyd Braun. Yeah, of course. Yeah. And even up here, I mean, it's I've done, gosh, I want to say 3 or 4, maybe 5 series for that lasted, one of them for 15 years, 15 seasons. And one of the first questions is almost always, what was it like on Seinfeld? It's one of those touchstones of our culture now, that and even that's even transposed itself into 2021, as opposed to the hottest show like MASH from years ago. I think it's got more legs than so many other shows that have come before it.
And it's one of those episodes where some people don't even know the title. They refer to it as the Lloyd Braun episode, So it's like the point where they let guest stars shine. You clearly stepped up and having that reference, I think it's just kudos to you.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you.
Yeah, Peter,
Maybe they'll do a movie.
Well, they did. The finale brought people back, but you didn't really wrong them. That they used a lot of people they brought back usually was wronging them. In this case, it was almost like they wronged you almost in a way, not so much, which is not doesn't happen a lot.
They got me fired. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. With guest characters, usually the main 4 are the ones getting hosed, but in this case, it sort of was like. But yeah, I mean, this has been great. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you maybe had thought of that was that you wanted to kind of maybe about the on set or anything like that any stories you had that we didn't ask about that you wanted to share for?
I can't. Nothing in particular. I mean, it was a real stellar time in especially for television and broadcast television. Things are changing a lot these days, and different ways of making television is changing the landscape a great deal, and so many of the rules that were applicable back then were something called pilot season, which lasted from January to about April or May in Los Angeles, doesn't really exist anymore, because Netflix will start up a show in May, and NBC is doing half of what it used to. So things are morphing, but good stuff is good stuff, and Seinfeld was right up there with good stuff. And the wrap party for that year at Seinfeld was at the Griffith Observatory. Oh, they rented out the whole place, and it was just brilliant, just brilliant. And you should try to get the gag reel, because it does exist.
So the wrap party, is that everyone from season 5, like guest stars, etc., come to that?
Yeah, all the regulars, all the guest stars, all the crew, all everybody, all the network executives, they all show up at the Griffith Observatory and quaff champagne and
well, you were season 5 is our favorite season. That's incredible. That party must have been something.
It was a hell of a party. Yeah. But again, you know, I'm just like one little cog in this giant thing where.
Right, but all these cogs, I mean, that's what our podcast is all about, is the guest stars who, you know, we always say, I always like to say, I mean, without the guest stars, and a lot of it sounds like Hirschfeld is one of the key important people in all this, because he's casting you and all these guest stars so perfectly. I mean, no one, the lines you deliver, and, you know, a lot of major chicks in this place, and wow, that's a bitch, you say at one point when I think George is complaining, like, just, you know, no one's delivering the way they're casting these parts. They just know, it's just incredible how it all comes together. And I think it is a testament you're talking about before with Larry David and Jerry at the helm. You know, it's top down, and it's making sure that everyone has, you know.
Yeah. Well, Mark Hirschfeld just fed the machine, you know, and it was up to them to decide. Oh yeah, that's the guy that's saying the lines right, you know. Yeah.
But it was.
I don't know. I don't remember if Cranston was in on that. Was Cranston's character in before?
After you.
After?
Yep.
Well, then I can almost guarantee you he was up for Lloyd Braun.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, we hear stories like from a lot of people when the audition was happening, like the people waiting in the room or trying to audition were like, you know, top of the top. So I'm sure Cranston and you cross paths on Seinfeld as well.
Yeah. I like Cranston was just that, you know, I think that everything that he what was it, Boy Meets World, what was that show that he did after
Malcolm in the Middle?
Malcolm in the Middle, Boy Meets World, yeah.
Same thing.
I think he did that subsequently, right? I think he did that I want to say mid-late 90s, something like that. Yeah, so anyways, his heyday came after I was gone. Otherwise I would have had his career.
Did the visa law get changed from between 96 and now?
You know, I keep hearing all sorts of odd comments about how visa laws have changed, and they went back and forth with successive governments and lobbying efforts by the Canadian government and the Canadian Actors Union and the American Actors Union. I don't. The bottom line is I don't know. If it has, I hope it's to the benefit of people that were in positions like mine, because you know, that was blatantly very unfair. And you know, if I didn't want to play by the rules, I could have just said yes, I have the visa, and then when it came to, you know, because I had a social security number, and just had gone down there, and when came time for payment, then there's my visa. Something like that. But right. That's, you know, that hindsight again is 2020. But you know, playing by the rules, it's just it's hard, and it's, you know, it's like when you're in business like this, and even getting an H visa where you have to prove to a bureaucrat that is not necessarily any kind of creative person that you are a creative entity of worth, is a complicated thing. And when they're trying to make rules up for how immigration and everything else should run, it's not necessarily going to go well. And that's one of the things we struggle with in this country, is that, you know, we have an awful lot of government subsidies for Canadian content in this country, which you don't need or want in your country because you have a self-sufficient industry. But it's a complicated thing, and it's not necessarily the best way to go, but it's what we got.
Yeah.
Well, listen, for what it's worth, we mentioned before, you know, you are our choice for Lloyd Braun. You carried that episode, and we're glad we got to the bottom of it. And I think a lot of fans are going to be interested in that. So it's great to hear. It had nothing to do with
and red tape. Well, always the problem, but
baloney. Yep.
I'm telling you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this has been great, Peter. We really thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is, I mean, the behind the scenes stuff, the double shooting, you know, two different endings, and just everything. It's been.
Does Jerry and Larry know you're doing this?
We'd like to think so.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, we reached out to Jerry's a few times, actually. Larry's a little hard to get a hold of. But we have reached out to Jerry a couple of times, and you know, yeah, we're working on it. We've been doing this a year now. Today's our year anniversary, so.
Oh, that's great! Congrats.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter. This has been great. We really appreciate it, and we'll let you know when it's out and everything. So,
Okay.
cool. Thanks,
Cheers.
Peter.
All the
care.
best.
All the best. Thank you.
Best.
All right.